And we are live. To those in the city and those in the sticks, it's round six. I am joined once again with my British counterpart, someone who is so far left. Karl Marx looks like a far righter. Um, I'm joined with Owen. How are you doing today?
Oh, um, ill, but beyond that, at full debating capabilities, I'd say.
Okay. For those who, if they don't know what the YouTube video title is, we're going to be talking about fascism, Antifa, and Black Lives Matter. Oh, hang on a second. Hide the professionalism on S Man Speaks. All right. So, with fascism, I'll say fascism and how it is in the current.
Just before you start, are we sticking to sort of a topic at a time? Like we're just trying to keep it, on point and stuff.
Actually, I'm gonna set a timer. Actually, let's
A,
try and rein
a
it.
timer?
Well, what I'm trying to say is like we have a topic. We'll talk about it for a certain period of time, just so we don't like go on for like a marathon of like hours or something. Like just to keep it at a reasonable time. Let me
I more
just.
meant when I said like keeping on point, just if we're like talking about one thing, try to keep our points more succinct. Because I feel sometimes we go a little bit off topic, really, with the
Yeah.
uh,
All right. Let's. Okay. So I have a paragraph. Like I do have quite a bit of an opening statement, but I'll just keep it brief, and I think we'll actually go through it point by point eventually. So I'll say that fascism is an embarrassing attempt by people who can't accept that their terrible ideology's final pages are being written. People do debate and discuss anti-fascist movements, like Antifa, for instance. I don't make an apology for fascism in the slightest, as it is responsible for the deaths of I don't know how many people, but that'd be too depressing to find the numbers there. Punching fascists is the what the left says is an ideal to quell fascism. Um, and we'll talk about I guess that in a minute, but fascism. If it comes down to how to handle it, I will say there might be some agreement in some areas, but I'm not trying to pull the slippery slope fallacy, but it does raise some concerns if we start saying, yeah, you can punch fascists. I think that I will call that the opening statement, but I do have some other points I'll bring up later, so you can go ahead.
Okay, so firstly, quite simply, I'd like to ask you what you recognize fascism is. What do you think fascism resembles or is?
Oh, that's simple. Fascism, simply by its definition, and I know people like to bitch at me for using the definition, but it's pretty accurate. Fascism is a form of radical authoritarian nationalism characterized by a dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition. Um, like, for instance, if in the United States we have freedom of speech, I'll give that as an example. If if the United States was to do a total about face and prevent people from protesting its government, I would say that is heading towards fascism. The United Kingdom does not have freedom of speech. There was a guy jailed for because this what was his I don't even know what his name was, but he was this moron who had his dog do a Nazi salute and he was posting stupid bullshit on YouTube. I don't know if it was YouTube or Twitter, but he got arrested. Now he's doing time in jail. I think his name was Count Dankula or some stupid name there. But yeah, I would say that fascism is authoritarianism on steroids. To answer your question in a more succinct way.
Um, well, I think there's some of that was correct. I would add the additional core element of fascism, which is that fascism is the last vanguard of the ruling class. It's the attempt of the wealthy and the powerful to maintain their power beyond the limits they've exceeded under capitalism.
Okay.
So, for instance, it follows the decay of the capitalist economy, as we've seen, for instance, in Nazi Germany, where Great Depression happened in America, and Western countries were falling to economic brutality. And obviously, if you're in economic crisis, often it can lead to, like we saw in Russia, an attempt for workers to seize the means of production, to overthrow the capitalist class. So the wealthy, the landowners, businessmen, seek the more extreme alternative, namely fascism, the consolidation of power to the ruling class by deregulating the economy, by removing constrictions on corporations to act as they wish, in exchange for the nationalism, the patriotism, the persecution of the marginalized and ethnic minorities, a reversion to traditional standards, all done to maintain the power. So to use an example, Adolf Hitler had colossal support from corporations and from landowners in Germany and abroad. You look at people like Henry Ford, and there are many in the UK who own land who were big fans of Hitler because his policies were deregulation of the economy, and protecting the private property of the wealthy, using suppression of workers, of leftist groups, of minorities and stuff. Fascism at its core is a right-wing movement, and I think it's crucial that we recognize the at the core of that it's capitalism in decay, that it fundamentally stems from capitalism.
All right. Well, I will say that when it comes to, for instance, whether or not the Nazis were socialist or capitalist or what have you, I don't personally see that it matters. I say that regardless of what the Nazis believed in, it doesn't matter what economic policies they believed in. I would say that it is rather odd that, I don't have a problem necessarily with some deregulation of the economy, but I won't say that. Son of a bitch. Sorry, just my friend in the chat's trying to phone call me. Fucking hell. Sorry. Anyway, back to what I was pointing out, that deregulation of the economy, depending on what the regulations are, I don't have a problem with. Capitalism, I will say that, you saying it's just a right-wing thing for fascism is just a right-wing thing. I would say, if you fit the, don't know what that was. Let me go back to if you're suppressing people and you're authoritarian, I think the word radical is redundant in that sentence, but I don't think you have to necessarily be right-wing to be a fascist, like Stalin. For the deaths that happened under him, I don't think you have to be right-wing to be a fascist. Semantics aside, though, I will say that regardless of whether you're left or right, if you're authoritarian, I say that you probably are closer to fascism than people like you and me.
Okay,
Hello?
so numerous points there. No, oh, sorry, I didn't know whether you'd finished or not.
Oh,
Firstly,
sorry.
I'd ask, why would you say that it doesn't matter what the Nazis were? Do you not think it's important to learn from the mistakes of the past and realize how the Nazis came to be, and learn quite importantly now, given we have a rising far right and a fascist in major offices of power?
Okay, I think that's what something I've been meaning to bring up with you, is that there's the issue of what the definition of like how do you define a far righter? Like, some people who are,
of course, but
well, like, because the reason I bring this up is for instance, the economic far right. People are very vague with just saying far right. Like, there's some people who are economically far right, like Humane Mind, but socially are, if people use the term socially left wing, which is silly, but if you use the term socially left wing, so are you still a far righter if you're socially left wing?
I'll come on to that in a second. But firstly, going back to what I just asked you, um, you know, does it not matter to learn from the mistakes made that led to Nazi control of Germany?
Well, of course.
Exactly. So it's important to realize how Nazism came to be and why it came to be, and make sure we don't make the same mistakes now, given we have a rising fascist movement in numerous countries in the West today.
How do you define fascism? How do you define fascism?
Okay, so fascism is authoritarian nationalism and ultra-capitalism. It's essentially the commodification of life ramped up to maximum to protect the private property and wealth of the capitalists. So, for instance, deregulation of the economy, consolidation of the wealth of power and stuff of the capitalists, suppression of worker movements and workers in general, suppression of minorities and LGBTQ people, maintaining the social order and power that allows those on top to maintain their power at the expense of everyone beneath them. That is ultimately fascism. So fundamentally, it's about maintaining that hierarchy, and thus it is right wing.
Okay, well, when it comes to suppressing worker groups, in this country at least, we have the First Amendment that says that the Constitution is to prevent. It's not to say what we the people can't do. It's to say what the government can't do. It's to curtail what the government can do. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. As for suppressing people, we do have the equal protection, equal protection under the Constitution. Now, I'm not saying that just because it's a part of the Constitution means that nobody's going to go up against it, but we at least have some safeguards in that respect. And unlike the United Kingdom, when it comes to free speech, I would argue that we're maybe a little better off when it comes to civil liberties than the United Kingdom. Not trying to make a dig at your country, but still. Now, why I said it doesn't matter what their economic policy was is, some people were authoritarian but anti-capitalist, like Joseph Stalin. There was some people who were authoritarian and their attitude was either you're in favor of capitalism or I'll chuck you out of a helicopter, aka Pinochet. I will say that learning from the mistakes people made about Nazi Germany, which is, I guess, will be an example we use throughout the time we'll be talking about this part. The mistake was blindly just following, some people were smart enough to see the writing on the wall and they got the hell out. Some people left Germany because they could see the writing was on the wall and that they would be absolutely screwed if they didn't. And some people were blind, Trump supporters, with some of them being all happy about the airstrikes that were just done in Syria. And people are so blind to that. Donald Trump could do just about anything, and he'll be an example I guess we could use. They're so blind, he could do anything, and he's still just he could do anything, and they'll think, oh, he is just as good as Ronald Reagan. Anyway, you go ahead.
Okay, so before I come on to the comments about the Nazis, I'd just like to say that America, you may well have your amendments and your constitution and stuff, but as you both recognized on the last stream, your workers' rights are pretty shoddy. There's barely any power for unions. There's barely any right to strike laws and stuff, and actual worker solidarity. The power corporations have to suppress their workers is monumental, which is why most workers or many workers live below the living wage, while their bosses get billions. It's how you have the mega rich living off the labor of the suppressed working class. But moving on to the main point, the Nazis didn't just get into power by tricking everyone. There was clear recognition that Hitler and his Nazi party were a major threat. However, Hitler, being a fascist, recognized that the far left were his greatest threat. So the propaganda machine comes into play. He famously put substantial effort into suppressing the far left. So he blamed the Reichstag fire on them, on communists, and subsequently banned the Communist and Socialist Party, and obviously imprisoned numerous members of far left activist groups, far left leaders, politicians. So removed an entire portion of the electorate, and obviously removing the vote for many workers who were voting for them, because workers well, yeah, you could say some people have the option to leave, but if it's, Depression era Europe, the worker is not going to have any power. It's not going to have any. How are they going to leave a country when they've got no money and anything's going into their food and their rent and maybe not even feeding their kids and stuff. So for you to suggest, oh, they could have just left, it's like that's not the point, and they couldn't anyway, even if they could.
Well, I was saying that some people saw the writing on the wall and they left. Some probably did, and they realized they were screwed and that there was nothing they could do.
But there didn't have to be, it's not up to one or two people to realize, say, oh, we should leave, and if not, we're screwed. It shouldn't be even happening in the first place.
Well,
Anyway,
of course.
Anyway, the whole point is that fascism isn't something that can just be stopped by intelligent individuals. It's something that grows from a system of capitalism. You look at what happened in the Weimar Republic, and you see capitalism grinding into decay. The market crashes. There's inflation. There's all these sort of problems you see coming from what happens when capitalism enters its late stage, and fear the ruling class, fearing what happened in Russia, where the Tsar was overthrown and stuff, turns to the far right, turns to the Nazis, who offer them protection from the workers, suppression of the workers, deregulation and commodification of the land and of the workers and stuff, in exchange for their social order. And it's not like it was going to be totally free, but ultimately the capitalists accept the conditions because they maintain their wealth, they get even wealthier, and all we have to do is just let some far right people into government who are still in favor of capitalism, but obviously offer them the extra protection through the suppression and stuff. Now, if we compare that to today, we look at what Trump is doing, and no one's saying that, oh, Trump is literally Hitler. No one's saying that Trump is literally the exact same as Hitler. I mean, for one, Hitler is a far more aware and reasoned speaker. Trump is, quite clearly not very politically literate. However, the movement that's happening around him, the moves by the administration to recognize and impose their policies is really similar. You look at what's happening with the economy, with the deregulation corporations are getting, with the tax breaks corporations are getting. You look at the police and military being ramped up. You look at the nationalism Trump is using in his rhetoric and stuff. You look at what is happening to the environment at the expense of, the wealthy and stuff. In many ways, Trump is actually a purer capitalist than Hitler, because Trump, unlike Hitler, is isn't care about the environment and the land and stuff. He cares about making money, and through any cost, and through imposing oppression of the workers and of nationalism. So if we don't recognize and label Trump a fascist and his movement of fascism, essentially, and fully oppose Republicans on that basis, and start deconstructing the tools of both fascism and of capitalism, we're going to be in a similar position to what we saw in Nazi Germany.
All right. I like the once again. I love the enforcement of your own rule of 1 point at a time. But okay. Well, like I said with unions. Coming back to what you said about unions. Let me see what I wrote. Okay, so there are many reasons for union decline. There was lack of desire. People don't see themselves staying, and some unions were badly run. About Trump being a fascist. I will say that, and coming back to a lot of things you said, with the ramping up of the military, I believe this will cause an economic crash, because if you're doing all these tax breaks, but you're ramping up defense spending, this is the same shit that Reaganomics is responsible for the recession that happened in the 1990s. And I will say that yes, Trump is not politically literate. He's probably not literate, period, but I digress. I will say that in the terms of, I mean, I see what you're saying. I almost started to believe the same thing as you did, but I will say that with tax breaks by themselves and the idiotic way of ramping up the military, I say that's concerning for the economy, but I wouldn't say it's like, oh, he's a fascist if he raises defense spending like Ronald Reagan and does all these idiotic tax cuts, um, and doesn't. And I don't even think he even said what's going to pay for the tax cuts, because you got to find a way to pay for the tax cuts. Um, you know, I will say that it. I wouldn't say he's a fascist for that. I would just say he's like economically uh, a little naive on the front of, oh yeah, let's cut taxes, raise defense spending, send our National Guard troops to the border, which is going to cost us, the taxpayer, even more money. The Republicans, yeah, I'd say some of them are far right socially, and maybe a few of them are economically. Um, and okay, to not go over too many points in one go, you can go ahead with your next point. Oh wait,
Okay.
we got a question in the chat for you. He says, Mr. Insanity says, "Oh, and why do businesses hire people of color if capitalism is fascism? There are black CEOs, Owen." Well, I think affirmative action plays a role in that, and I think affirmative action is really a waste of time. But I think that could answer your question, Mr. Insanity. But
Did they
I'm
not
not.
ask me the question?
Well, they did, but I could just see your answer being, well, affirmative action though. But whatever, go ahead.
Well, I don't think I ever said capitalism is fascism. I said fascism grows from capitalism, and capitalism becomes, decays into fascism. But I didn't say right now capitalism is fascism.
Well,
So,
that's what he. So I guess he's, I don't know, putting words in your mouth. But oh, and one other thing. Unlike the United Kingdom, the United States, we do have a Second Amendment. So let's say, for instance, the government was to start attempting to execute its own people. There is 320 million Americans versus, let me see how many people are in law enforcement, because I don't know right off the top of my head, but and combined with the military. But yeah, them versus us, I think we would probably be able to overthrow the government right now, considering that there's millions of us versus the rest of the military and police.
um,
Go
you
ahead.
don't. Well, I mean, firstly, it's all right visualizing that when it's just Trump and his like police officers, but when it's lots of you know people in the country who also support this movement, they don't have to call it fascism for them to support it, because they don't know everyone is just going to think, oh, I have this perfect description for my ideology. Not everyone's thinking like that, but
Well, yeah.
you don't have to idealize the movement to not be able to call. I'm not saying you don't have to call it fascism for it to be fascism. Expecting Trump to just come out and say, yes, I'm a fascist, is quite naive, because
Well, of course.
that's not that's propaganda and stuff, isn't it? They're not going to just come out and say their plan, which is sort of why I get frustrated with the number of people who take the literal word of what these politicians are saying, expecting them to just be completely honest about their goals. That's not, if you're going in with that view, then what do you expect but to be conned and led into an authoritarian regime? Anyway, coming on to what you said about some stuff.
Bless you.
Sorry.
You're all right.
Okay, so taxpayer spending. You said that Trump will put money onto the taxpayer.
No, I didn't. I did not. I said that. Well, I said that he would probably
not the other
cause.
way. He said his policies would cause harm to the taxpayer.
You're damn right.
Well, of course. I mean, the intention is to funnel money up to the wealthy, to keep the power of the ruling class. So it's not like he's intending to make the country better. Like when he comes out with saying, "Oh, our tax breaks mean poor people have more money," it's rubbish, and he knows it's rubbish. He knows what he's doing, and his government know what he's doing. And it doesn't matter what they say, because at the end of it, the wealthy are going to have more power, are going to have the power over the working class to suppress and control the workers. So
Okay.
it's a bit sort of futile saying that it's gonna, Trump will actually cause harm instead of good, because he knows he's, going to what he's going to do.
Well,
Any
mhm.
what was I going to say next? You said that Trump is, just because he's using tax breaks and stuff.
He didn't.
And
I didn't find what. Okay, well, I'll repeat it. I didn't find what he said. Oh yeah, I'm going to have the tax cuts paid for by this. And the reason I've mentioned that is, for instance, Reaganomics. They just cut taxes, raised defense spending, and that resulted in the deficits that caused a recession in the 1990s. And I
yes,
have
yeah.
yes that.
Okay. Well, yeah. We're spiraling into another economic crash, and that is because capitalism, ultimately is going to crash. It's always going to crash because you can't have sustained continuous growth. You're never going to just continually make profits. It's always going to come crashing down. And subsequently, the capitalists, people at the top making living the high life, benefiting from the labor of others, they think, oh well, we need to maintain our power, and thus they turn to fascists. That's why Trump is backed by so many wealthy people. That's why Republicans are the party of the wealthy, and the Democrats, they have lots of wealthy sponsors too. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Democrats are a good party by any means.
I know.
They're rubbish. But fundamentally, Republicans and those on the right, they control. They want to maintain the control of the wealthy, of the powerful. They want to maintain social order. Thus, they align themselves with fascists when capitalism starts to decay, like today. Oh
Bless
God,
you.
sorry. And subsequently, they turn to fascism. So it's important to recognize that capitalism, it decays, and as from that, fascism arises.
All right. Well, I agree. Coming back to what you said, I don't think the Democrats are any better than the Republicans. I say they're sometimes one of the same. However, I would say that the problem with the Republicans is that they are too socially far right. And I would say that if anything, I would agree that sometimes they might be closer to fascism than the Democrats are, but that depends. Coming back to you continuously harping on the economy, which the tax cuts, well, yes, I'll say they were bullshit. They were funneling up to the wealthy. I will say the economy does better usually under Democrats than the Republicans. So while the plastic politicians, Clinton, I'm sorry, who bail out these corporations and everything. While yeah, sure they do that, they don't have crashes as monumental as the one in 2007 and 8 under George W. Bush. And when it comes to people saying, "Oh God, capitalism is on its last legs," we got to start turning to fascists to protect our money now. And also, I want to bring back what you were saying about how, no shit, the government is not going to say outright what their plans are. Like, yes, I'm very much aware that that's the case. That they're not going to say, "Oh yeah, we're just going to sell our credibility to the and our values out to these corporations." Like, yeah, like that's fairly obvious they wouldn't do that. And we have the right to bear arms in the United States, unlike the United Kingdom. So let's say fascists were to start rounding up people and attempting to do to them what happened under Nazi Germany. People who, if they saw this, for instance, let's say you witnessed a van pull up trying to take someone off the street, we'll just use that as an example. If you had a gun, which I think you actually once said that you don't think guns are, I'm trying to remember the context you said it in. I think you said at one point they were not a legitimate form of self-defense or something along those lines. I can't remember verbatim, but you could, if you wanted to, protect that person. And hang on a second.
guess I'm left hanging. Fantasy standings 0-2, S-Man nil.
Wait, what?
Just looking at something in the chat. Anyway, continue what you're saying. Forget that.
I see what you're talking about. Anyway, I will say that, I do see. Yeah, you're right. They're not going to say what their plans are. However, if we see the writing on the wall, and we do see that this is going to the shit is going to hit the fan, I'd say that, yeah, I'm totally fine with the public being armed and overthrowing our own government. I did the math, and from what I got, there's about 1.1 million or so police officers in the United States, and there's about 1.4 or so million members of the military. But the problem is that it doesn't specify if they're current or former. But let's just say they're all going to cause human rights abuses and do pretty much what happened under Nazi Germany. There is 320 million of us. There's more guns than people in the United States, and it would be an absolute uphill battle for the few million that are going to attempt to cause harm to the rest of the country. Now, yeah, there's some Trump supporters, aka morons, who are so blinded by their love for Donald Trump. He could throw communists out of helicopters, and they'd still say he's making America great again. So yeah, there's the few people who are dumb enough to buy into what he's saying, and then there's some people that have an IQ above 60 who see him for the piece of shit that he is. And I would also like to ask you a question from the chat. JPM says, what about the iron law of oligarchy?
The iron law, I don't know what that is.
I have no idea either.
Let's just, you can ask me that another time. Anyway, you
All
said,
right.
If fascists start rounding up people and pulling them off the streets, then people would do something. Well, that's already... Look what ICE is doing right now to immigrants in America. But it's true.
I'm sorry about the laughing part.
It's completely true. ICE are right now rounding up immigrants, and that's what I talk about when I say Trump, increasing the militarization of the police and of law enforcement. They're going around pulling people off the streets or out of schools or out of hospitals even. To deport them, often resulting in their deaths or their mistreatment, and people are actively celebrating that. There's 320 million people. You're assuming that most Americans even recognize fascism, let alone are actively against it. You say that Trump, Trump, he's not well supported, but you don't have to be well supported to seize control. You don't have to be, as American democracy quite clearly shows, you don't have to have the majority of people on your side to have the power politically. And in America as well, there's too many people who, they're okay, so they're not going to bother helping people. They've got their own, and they're too focused on themselves to recognize the misery people are going through elsewhere. It's not like Trump was just the first bad thing to happen to America. America's had problems with capitalism for decades. Obama, it's not like his reign was just his presidency was just a peachy time. It was still a there was a lot of stuff going on. Trump is just it's not like he's the bad guy. He's just a capitalist who's got lower limits, therefore is a fascist. He's got no patience for the regulation and stuff. And as we've already seen, many of his things have been supported by lots of Americans, like the deportation of immigrants and of non-nationals, like the curbing of LGBTQ rights and stuff.
Okay.
Right now, someone's posting in the chat, illegal immigrants are criminals. You're already buying into the rhetoric that is. So I'm nearly finished. You're buying into the rhetoric of dehumanizing people based on the fact that they're not from a nation. There's no difference. You don't. The Trump rhetoric has allowed people to believe that. So this idea that you just stop fascism if it actually started to rise, it's already rising. It's already happening around you, and lots of people don't even care. And then when people do try and do something, they get slated and criticized and framed as the violent ones and the terrorists and stuff, like with Antifa and stuff.
All right, so a ton of points. When it comes to ICE, I'm just going to say this outright, and I don't care if people are going to get offended by this. When it comes to what ICE is doing, now, when it comes to them mistreating people, I, of course, find it wrong, considering that this is just going to be a burden. What they do is going to be a burden on anyone else who is involved with ICE, as they're going to be generalized and, kind of like you're doing when you're saying that they're, well, not, I don't think you were necessarily generalizing, but I wouldn't be surprised at the point. But look, I'm going to say this, that if you enter the country illegally, like I said last time, I can't feel sorry for you if you get arrested and deported. That risk's on you, and I can't feel sorry for you if you know that happens. And with deregulating the economy, that by itself, or having impatience for regulations, I don't see the real issue. Now, I'll say this, but if you're going to go with the logic of what he does, is where you you abolish like certain regulations, I say, you find out the consequences. Now, this is just for people that are intelligent enough to think about this. Like, if you're going to abolish regulations, find out the impacts. Like, there's, I bet the 80,000 pages of regulations that are a real bitch for businesses to deal with. If you were to go over all those pages, which would take you at least a good day to read about 1,000 pages, you find out the pages that are bullshit and a waste of time, and you get rid of them. However, you have to take into consideration the effects and the consequences of doing so. And with ICE rounding up people and arresting them for being illegally here, well, that's the fault of those who were illegally here. Sorry, but I can't feel sorry for people who know. If I enter that country illegally, I have to look over my shoulder. I cannot sign my name to any bill. I can't do a lot of things. I have to live off the grid. To me, I would rather just stay in the country I'm in than constantly be afraid and paranoid that if I do something, if I'm seen in public or I sign my name to something, you're just screwed. You're going to be deported. And I will also say that with people with fascism currently rising, I'm not saying that, oh yeah, all like a good chunk of all 320 million Americans are like, oh no, the president is a moron. Well, a good chunk of Americans still don't like him, but not all of them are going to do the right thing, as humanity is showing itself to not be intelligent enough to do the right thing. I mean, I'm sorry, but like half of America believes in creationism, so that just dwindles their IQ.
It's not about intelligence, but anyway, continue.
Well, either way, some people do see the writing on the wall. They see the writing on the wall that Trump's going to kill the economy because the Republicans are the party of economy killers. He's going to be a disaster he is a disaster for foreign policy, as that is. And when saying a mission accomplished, it reminds me of, it's almost as if Trump is the brother of George W. Bush, was saying mission accomplished. And, I do agree. I get annoyed when people buy what politicians say word for word when they're running for the presidency or any political office. When he said, I'm a non-interventionist. Bullshit. Doing drone strikes on a country that's harming its own people, or doing air missile strikes, is absolutely idiotic. You're trying to punish a country for hurting its own people by attacking that country, and I don't know how many people have died in the most recent air strikes, but it's fucking hilarious when these people who attack Syria say we're punishing them for hurting their own people, and we're going to punish them by killing their people that the government was already going to kill if we didn't kill them first. And the money that's being spent on the military to do this could have fixed the issue in Flint, Michigan with its water. It could have fixed God knows how many issues. And I'm not saying I'm ever going to run for the presidency, but if I could, and let's say I got elected, I'd focus on more domestic issues than foreign, because screw all the other countries. I don't care enough to intervene in other countries' affairs. And I will say that with the current two-party system, where the Democrats, the Republicrats is what they should be called, and the Demopublicans with their intervention in other countries' affairs, it's a waste of our money. It's a waste of our time, and it's so hypocritical. Did not mean to go on that tangent, but that was something that I've had on my mind for a long time, and you gave me the opportunity to vent that, so I got to say thank you for that. Go ahead.
Okay. Slight echo, man.
I'm sorry?
There's a slight echo.
I don't think that's on my. I don't know if that's on my end.
Well, it can't be on my end because it's echoing through your mic. So
Hang on a second. Let me change the
I
settings.
think it's all right now, actually.
Okay. Hide the professionalism on these streams. Me and Owen are stream professionals here. Anyway,
Anyhow, I'll go.
Go ahead.
I'll go from here even a minute. Okay, so right off the bat, immigrants coming to a country illegally, the key adjective is illegal. Illegal based on a law, which the law is not just. The law is not justified in this instance. And thus, really, you got to be asking if you're going to just deem someone illegal simply for not using the sanctioned methods of entering the country in a country that's already got backwards and irresponsible, violent laws in place. You got to ask: is that justified? Is it justified to ram people up simply because they didn't enter using the absurd method of entering the country? One that essentially requires you to have substantial wealth in the first place to get there. And the fact that you're saying I don't have any sympathy for people who get rounded up by ICE shows that this thing you were saying earlier about recognizing fascism and about opposing fascism when the writing's on the wall is sort of obsolete for a lot of people, like even yourself, because I'm not saying you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'm a pro-fascist, but your fellow people, human beings, are being treated like cattle. And you're sitting here saying, "Oh, I've got no sympathy for them. You shouldn't have come here illegally." Like the whole point is that they're trying to make a better life for themselves. The law in this instance is unjust. It's not fair for people to even be born into poverty, let alone entering another country supposedly illegally. And really, we should be moving away from that. The whole nationalism even is a core tenet of fascism. It's a way of controlling people, a way of maintaining hierarchy, and what stems into the imperialism and colonialism and enforcement of capitalism that America does globally, like bombing nations to seize their resources, like destroying countries in Latin America because they dare stray away from capitalism. All this stuff you're saying ultimately ignores the core tenet of the fact that capitalism is about maintaining a power through the free market, through commodifying the labor of the workers, through the private ownership of the means of production, and thus the other stuff. It all contributes to that. What was I going to say?
Before you go on, I just want to address that really quickly. With the, I will say that yes, like I said earlier, the United States is very hypocritical. The cognitive dissonance is more staggering than someone who's very intoxicated on alcohol. With the private ownership of the means of production, I don't see any objection to it. I understand you do, and that's fine. But that itself is, but on its own, it's fine. But if you start saying, if anyone tries to control, like say, nope, it has to be our way, or we're going to hit you over the head, by saying it, you get what I'm saying. Like, it's you hit someone over the head, saying, nope, you're going to do it my way or the highway. But in this case, it's do it my way or we're over. Hang on. But I'll say it's the United States is hypocritical in its values, and if you're trying to say, if you don't have private ownership of the means of production, we're going to kill you. Okay, that is definitely fascistic, and I would say that it is unjustifiable.
Okay, so firstly, the idea that you can just pick and choose which parts of capitalism don't contribute to fascist rhetoric is wrong. You can't just say that private ownership of means of production is fine, but it won't lead to fascism, or it's not a problem, because it's all part of the ideology that leads to it. It's not as though you can just say that some elements of fascism don't contribute and make it easier for fascists to take control. the whole point of applied means of production is essentially saying that we should portion society up for a few people to control, because the means of production it's not like literally just a factory. It's the land that the factory builds on. It's the water and food. It's the energy. It's everything that makes the production possible in society. It doesn't belong specifically to anyone. It's just there, and it should be for all. There's no reason for it to be divided up for a few people, because ultimately, like the whole structuring of capitalism is based on theft. The theft of labor value, the idea that workers should just be the commodities for the capitalists to profit off, despite the capitalists not doing anything. And it's based on false logic. Thus, the whole overthrow of it is not it's not like we're taking from people. It's seizing stuff back for the workers, back to everyone, so that no one has to be forced into the horrors of the system we have today. Anyway, fascism, it's not like it just arrives and it's like, oh yeah, it's fascism now. Like it's not like we're just gonna one day say we're switching. Like it doesn't come like that. It comes through gradual processes. Very rarely would you see just a party say, yeah, we're a fascist party, everyone vote for us, because people people recognize that it's not good. You're not going to win people over by just saying, yeah, we're Nazis. Hence people on the far right come up with all these new labels. It's identitarian, like some people in Europe, the alt-right, all these new names to mask the fact that they're very ideologically similar, or even the same as the ideologies of old. And almost finished.
Okay.
Yeah, so we gotta look at the fact that it doesn't just start with an immediate switch. It starts with the tenets of capitalism, the idea that labor is a commodity, the idea that anything can be a commodity, the idea that deregulation and no limit is a good thing, the idea that land can just be owned by someone with no real justification other than they just own it, because they've got the right to own stuff over people, like land, water. The denial of life based on the fact that it's a free market and people just die, and capitalists don't care. You've got to look at, for instance, Flint in Michigan. There's no reason for those people to not have water, but a free market means that people can't afford basic elements of life because it's being held privately, and they just die. How many people do you think are suffering from lead poisoning because of that in one of the richest countries in the world? The whole system is built upon capitalist failure, but ultimately it's successful for the people on top who designed the system, because they're in control of the money and stuff. They've got the wealth. They're making profits out of the suffering and misery and ultimately the exploitation of labor of the people on below. And that's what fascism springs from. It's those people wanting to maintain the order, the power they have, and thus deregulating the economy even further, suppressing minorities and workers, doing all these things, because ultimately they want to maintain their power. And that's what fascism becomes. Capitalism, it's about accruing power and capital. And when that becomes harder to do, capitalists turn to fascism.
All right. Well, you did say quite a bit there. When it comes to what happened in Flint, I will say that there have been consequences for what happened in Flint. There have been people charged with the deaths of those who died in the incident. There was, past tense, was some free water bottle delivery for those who were in Flint. So there was some remedy, and then the state went fully moronic and cut that off. Now, when it comes to people turning to fascism, the problem with them turning to fascism, at least in this country, is we do, like I said earlier, have the ability to be armed against it. Now, I'm not, like I've said, because I feel like I'm going to have to repeat this, like I said, not everyone's going to see the writing on the wall. and arm themselves against people who are trying to kill them or cause harm. However, I will say that if people are starting to turn to violence and try and be all tyrannical, we have a better chance than your country, at least, because people are now not allowed to have knives in some city. I think it was in London. We have the ability to arm and defend ourselves against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And when it comes to the whole thing, I will say that, you know, it doesn't, to me, it never made sense to turn to fascism, considering that it's, one, going to kill your reputation off, but I know you're going to tell me that people don't give a shit about their reputation.
Sorry to cut you off.
Fair point.
Your audio.
But
S-man.
You can't really make a profit if someone. Hang on a second.
No, your audio.
No, hang on a second.
Audio.
Oh. Well, okay, let me fix that.
S-man.
What's up? Let me try and fix that.
No, am I coming through at the same time now?
Oh, okay. Okay, hang on a second. Let me fix that. Sorry to snap at you there. I just didn't know you were going to mention that. But hey,
am I coming through at the same time now?
Hang on a second. Let me put on my headphones all the way. Say something.
Hello?
I can't hear anything from your end, like reverb. But we have the ability to defend ourselves against all fascists. We have the weapons to do so, and you can't really make a profit if someone. Hello. I can hear you. Hello? I don't even know if you can hear me at this point. Oh, son of a bitch.
Hello? Hello?
King shit. So the audio is going full spastic here because
Hello?
ourselves against all fascists. We have the weapons to do so, and you can't really make a profit if someone. Hello.
Can you hear me? Yes, man.
Holy fucking shit. So the audio, everybody, is going full spastic because that is Google Hangouts is the technology in history. Hello. Can you hear me now? Hello.
Is the audio behind?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me? Oh God, audio's behind. Fuck my life. You know, if this hangout was to work, oh, you can hear me now?
Are you there, S-man?
Yes, I am.
Are we in sync?
I will be very shocked if we are.
What's 10 plus 10?
20.
Yay! Right, yes, we are in sync.
Oh, thank God. Anyway, so like I said, you can't really make a profit if someone, in self-defense.
You have to go back to the start, because your start of your thing, that's why I didn't hear any of it.
Oh God, okay. Like I said, we have the ability, we have the weapons necessary to defend ourselves against fascists because, and the reason if I were a corporatist shill, I wouldn't turn to fascism because I know that if I did, I can't really make a profit if someone puts a bullet in my head. So I would be very careful about what I do to make my money because I don't want to die by someone in self-defense shooting me. Um, and there are people, like I said earlier, who do see the writing on the wall, and I think there are some people who are going to bear arms against all those enemies. Um, um, so yeah, I'll keep an eye on the group chat of this hangout. So just type there if there is a issue with the audio again, because just so it doesn't sound like you're trying to like interrupt, like to insert a point there. Sorry about the snapping at you. I didn't realize you were going to tell me my audio was.
Yeah, it's completely fine. I mean, anyone would have assumed that I was trying to interrupt. I didn't really know what was going on because I could hear like just you speaking from a while ago, and then like I tried to say S man, and then like you obviously thought I was just trying to butt in.
I did not mean. I hardly ever snap at people in these conversations. So it's not like like when I had that debate with Ham and Geek, I did snap at Ham a few times, but yeah, I'll say that I do see that it is dangerous to turn to fascism to get anything done because at some point they might turn against you. It's like it's like if you're the one throwing gasoline at people, there might be a bit of backsplash, and it will go and bite you in the ass. So. But go ahead.
Okay, like, but do you not see what I'm trying to say though? Is that it's not you say that they're not going to make a profit, but they are, because fundamentally fascism is about making controlling power, consolidating the power you have, protecting yourself from the decay of capitalism by deregulating, seizing power, maintaining the power of the elite upon the workers. You're not going to have. It's not like you can just say, this company is in favor of fascist policies, so I'm not going to use them. You're not going to have a choice to use them because they have complete control of the means of production. You're not going to be able to avoid contributing to their wealth and selling your labor to them, because if you don't, you're going to have no income and you're going to die, or you'll be seized by the police and stuff. You talk about they'll be worried that they'll lose publicity. Like, they don't care. They don't care if or they won't care in time when we have full fascism. They're not going to be fussed because they don't need to care about that. They're not going to be bothered about where people loathe them, because they have the power to maintain themselves. That's the whole point of fascism. It doesn't just arise because people want to mess things up. It arises because capitalism can't sustain itself. The capitalists recognize this, and thus they seize power. And you keep talking about how people would just stand up against it. As you've already seen, that's not the case. So we've already seen ICE taking people off the street, and not only do people not do anything about it, they justify it, like you've done in this very debate, like many people do, and actively implore. People have a lot of ire towards people who are undocumented and come to America. They only come to America because of the fact it's a wealthier nation and conditions are better there, because of American and Western imperialism. But that's besides the point for now. But yeah, they come to a country to better themselves, just like anyone trying to survive the misery of capitalism. And then they're dehumanized and kicked out for it, or they if they're caught, they're kicked out.
All right.
Subsequently, if I could just finish,
sorry about that.
No worries. If you want to recognize fascism, you have to recognize that its core tenets stem from capitalism. And ultimately it's all very well said, it's not a completely free market, so it's not capitalism. It's all right having a bit of deregulation, but ultimately the only people you benefit and the only ideology you ultimately contribute towards is one of eventually fascism, because capitalism and fascism both share the seeking of control, the consolidation of power. Capitalism is about getting more capital, being more powerful, making more money, and fascism is that, but just ramped up to a level where you're actively, you're dehumanizing and suppressing the workers and stuff. and you've got to recognize that's where it stems from. Otherwise, you're not going to recognize it when it comes. You're not going to recognize that it's going to stem from capitalism. Anyway, you wanted
All
to
right.
say something.
Yeah. Okay. The Like I said, ICE rounding up people who knowingly broke the law is not fascism. I do see the issue with how you treat illegal immigrants. To me, I'm not the type of guy that says, oh, like I'm the type of guy that says if you enter the nation illegally, well, tough shit, you get deported. You knew the risks. It's like for those who smoke marijuana. I've met some people I know at my high school who say, oh yeah, they smoke marijuana. While I'm not going to report them to the cops because it's not the crime of the century, it's against the law. And I know that just because it's the law, does not necessarily mean it's right. But until that's changed, we have no choice but to abide by the law. And I would say that there is, after this, I think we should probably move on to how to handle fascism, considering that that is something we also disagree on. But when it comes to how to treat illegal immigrants, I will say treat them like humans, but deal with them the same way you would deal with a burglar. No, don't kill them, but get them the hell out. And also, illegal immigrants are the biggest insult to legal immigrants one can imagine. And I will say that, like I said prior stream, I don't like the anti-immigration crowd, just the illegal immigration crowd. And I will say that before we head into how to handle fascists, I will say that I'm not celebrating the deportation of people, as that's weird and that's a little sadistic to say the least. If you're gonna say, oh yeah, that illegal over there just got deported, ha 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 ha, that I will say is maybe a little sadistic and a little twisted nonetheless. And like I said earlier, I know you would say that, oh, they don't care if they are get a lot of disapproval for interacting with fascists like the corporations. But like I said, that if people are trying to, they're saying, oh, we got to get more capital, therefore let's start committing human rights abuses and harming people and trying to get more money to protect our land and everything. Simply put, if you're protecting the land you already own, like if I went onto your property and I'm saying, get the hell out, man, I'm taking your land, it's my way or the highway. In this country, if I did that, you could shoot me and you'd be justified. If I did it if this happened in your country, they don't even allow you to have knives, for God's sake. So you'd I don't know what exactly would happen, but it probably wouldn't be a good scenario. And you keep mentioning private property rights, and you keep mentioning that repeatedly, along with ICE, which we're going to go around in circles about ICE, which I'm not agreeing with every single way how they handle people. And I'm not saying the immigration system's perfect, but it's probably better than other nations who are totally open borders. But I will say that, yeah, private property rights is not a bad thing. Simply running your private property how you see fit, as long as you do not break the law. For instance, you don't start a fire that spreads to someone else's property and burns it down. You don't commit a murder on your private property. You don't, obviously you don't kill people or injure people on your private property. At that point, your property rights become invalid if you dare kill people on that property, unless it's in self-defense. I don't know if you're going to disagree with private property rights being invalid if you kill people on it, but I can assume you might agree that they're out the window if you kill somebody.
Anyway, going through all of what you said, it's
that.
not an insult to immigrants who had documentation that illegal immigrants exist. Like I said, the law is not justified, and instead of blaming people for trying to survive capitalism more, we should be focusing on the fact that the law is not justified. In the same way that at one point the law disqualified certain people from attaining basic rights and basic representation. We should be recognizing that the laws of the state and the borders are not justified, and that we shouldn't be dividing ourselves for no reason, essentially. So I don't care if someone's illegal. This comparison with burglary and people coming into a nation is not equivalent at all. Firstly, in fact, but burglars exist because ultimately people are trying to survive capitalism better. We don't, if we just remove the cause of, the poverty, the poorness, the need to constantly be selling your labor, you would not see people, just going on to someone else's house and like breaking in and taking something. There's isn't like people do it for fun. They do it because they're trying to survive. It's like people who steal from shops. They do so because they enjoy the thrill of the heist or whatever. They do it because they've most likely got kids to feed, or they're hungry, or they need to get nappies and stuff. It's not we portray crime as often, fundamentally the fault of the perpetrator, when in reality it's caused by, a system. Ultimately, if the system did not exist, you would not see the crime. So to compare, saying, oh, if you find illegal immigration, you should be fine with someone breaking into your house, is completely, it's not a comparison, essentially.
That is not even. I wasn't saying, oh yeah, you got to be like. I did not even say that anywhere in my statement. Oh yeah, you got to be fine with people breaking in your home if you're fine with illegal immigration. I don't know where the fuck you got that from.
Yeah,
Sorry to swear. But
you mentioned burglary, though, no?
I mentioned it when it came to private property, but look, the reason I said that illegal immigration, to come back to what you said there, why it's an insult, is you're basically saying to this person, the process you're going through to try to become a citizen. Well, oh, you're just wasting your time. I'm going to enter the nation without its consent. And the reason we even have an immigration policy to begin with, if I can. Zach Routley points out in the chat, the reason why we have border security is so we can vet immigrants in order to weed out, criminals from the non-criminals. And I'm not generalizing when I say this. So you can weed out criminals like murderers, rapists, thieves, etc., and separate them from the non-criminals, so the non-criminals can go into the country. And like I said, I don't like the attitude of the anti-immigrant crowd, like when Donald Trump said, "Oh, Mexicans are rapists. We need to build a wall." Sorry for the terrible Trump impression, but it's true. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have an immigration system, and we've already hashed out immigration last time. And I know you think we should have open borders. Is that something you've stated on Twitter and throughout your videos? Well, yeah, in one of your streams. But I will say that I don't care what your reason is for coming to the nation, as long as you have good intent. And you go through the process, I'm fine with you coming to the nation. If you're coming here because of warfare, or let's say, I don't know, like some disaster happens in your country, and you're going to be up shit's creek if you don't, get to another nation, I can see granting amnesty, as someone like Ronald Reagan did, which I still find it surprising he actually did that. But yeah, he granted amnesty, I think it was in 1987 or somewhere around that time, to almost 3 million illegal immigrants. Anyway, you can go ahead, and I don't mean to sound hostile when I was calling you out for that straw man you did there. Go ahead.
Straw man.
When you said that, when you said, you said when you were like, oh yes, man, you said that you have to be fine with burglary if you're going to be fine with illegal immigration. That was.
I said no. You said that. If it was something like that, wasn't it? Like you said essentially that was it you or someone in the chat? Illegal immigration. If you're fine with that, then you ought to. Would you make the same equivalence for someone entering your property illegally? Was it something like that?
I don't believe I made a point like that, but that's interesting. I mean, you say the borders are a social construct. Someone could say, "Oh yeah, those windows, the windows in my room are a social construct."
So that was what I was going against. Basically.
Well, I didn't even say, even though I did not say that until now. I'm just saying that is an interesting point I never considered. I didn't say that beforehand, but now that you mention that, that's rather interesting. But I do see some concerns with that type of point, but. I was just mentioning when it comes to protecting yourself, when I was talking about burglary, I said that in the United Kingdom, they don't even allow you to have knives, for Christ's sake, in London. But in the United States, if I were to break into someone's home, they could just blast me away and I'm done. in your country, since they don't have any gun rights there, you'd have to get kind of creative with how to defend yourself. That was all I was saying. I was like, and if I actually did say that, oh, you gotta be fine with burglary, man. If you're gonna be fine with illegal immigration, I would rescind that point and say, wow, I did not believe I just said that, but I don't think I did. But anyway, I guess I will watch this later in order to see when did this happen? Around an hour and 10 minutes. But anyway, go ahead.
So, okay, well, if you didn't say that, my mistake. I was,
it's fine.
The chat and conflating your speech and stuff, whatever. Anyhow, I'm trying to remember what I wrote down. If we're going to sort of wrap up, our points about fascism and about all this stuff, the idea that a person can just be illegal is, it's fundamentally wrong. We shouldn't be dividing ourselves like that. For you to say, it's all very well, people coming up with this idea of, oh, it's to vet out bad people to good people. But, in reality, that's not how it works at all. And many people who, could very easily be let in have to wait for years to attain basic entry. The whole reason people skip over it is because it's a nuisance going through that system. It's often deeply rooted in unfairness and stuff, and we shouldn't be curtailing the freedom of movement. And frankly, people you talk about what's it called? I can't remember the exact word you used. Supposed bad people. There are plenty who are born in the country who are bad, if not worse, than the worst of other nations. We shouldn't be creating stereotypes and ideas.
Hello?
Do you just leave the chat?
I did not mean to. My computer just went fully spastic on me, and it just said your PC ran into a problem and it needs to restart. And son of a bitch.
Anyhow,
this is
the
fun that I have with technical issues. When I just had a phone, I didn't have to worry about anything. Great. Anyway, you said no human is illegal, and then the speaker cut out, and now it started to lag, and now I can just hear your voice through it, and that was creepy. Go ahead.
Okay. Fascism ultimately stems from capitalism and tenets of capitalism and the things we have in society. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that you can't just all this rhetoric about how we're just going to oppose it if it arises. For the stuff you've been saying about it, be it about immigrants and how you're sympathetic for them if they get deported and they didn't enter the country legally, to the idea that private property and private ownership and means of production is justified. All these things contribute to it in one way or another, and you can't just separate it out as like, oh, the okay bits of it. You've got to recognize that ultimately the whole thing is fundamentally linked. And it's all very well, you and others sitting here and saying, oh, when you're talking rubbish, there's no similarity. Capitalism and fascism are completely different. But the only people you benefit are the capitalists and the far right who seek to consolidate their power. So yeah, I think that's I guess where we ought to end the fascism part. Maybe.
All right, but just oh god, I know I said we should. Okay, I'll insert one last point before. All right, the computer started to work again, so I'll just say this last point before I put on my headphones and actually. But I'll say this that I'm saying that private property ownership of private property rights it's fine depending on how you defend it. That's all I'm saying is it depends on how you plan to defend it. That's all I'm going to say before we get back. So I'm going to leave the Hangout really quickly to join on the computer. So just hang on a second.
No worries.
Two of me at the same time. How fun. Anyway, all right. So now to come back to what was I going to say? I think we were going to talk about okay, so we have fascism. Oh yeah, defending against fascism. So not much of a topic shift, everybody, but maybe a little bit. Okay, so when it comes to the How to handle fascism. I used to be staunchly against punching fascists and Nazis and all that, all those types of people a long time ago, truth be told. Me and Owen here had a debate entirely about whether or not it's fine to punch Nazis. I used to think, I used to say it was excessive. They're not gonna change just by punching them. However, after debating it for a while, I will admit, the day the debate happened, it's round 3, the one that happened. From that, before then, into the debate, and then after, it was something I stayed up late at night thinking, is this the right thing to position to hold? Is this the correct thing? It was something that I did think about how, I had to think about it. It was a moral quandary that still happens today. Now, like I said, fascism, it's an embarrassing ideology. I can't really take fascists seriously because it seems like a lot of them are don't have the balls to show their faces when they attack appearances and say certain groups are degenerate and so on and so forth. My concern with how to handle fascists is the problem is they don't really define a fascist. Now, there's the straw man left who people say, oh, these people say that if you don't agree with them, they're going to call you a fascist. Now, I say that's a minority of the left and a minority of anyone who calls someone a fascist. But yeah, my concern is, and we already did go over how to define a fascist, so I guess we can skip over that. But another question is, where do we draw the line? And I didn't get an answer to this last time. Where do we draw the line at where it's appropriate on whether or not to punch somebody who contains backwards beliefs? That is the problem I have, and that is I'm not saying, oh yeah, I'm staunchly against punching fascists. I just have some concerns, and other than that, I'd say if you're a fascist and someone punches you, I hope they had brass knuckles on. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think firstly, to go to the start of what you were saying, the entire sort of topic about defending against fascism, with you and I, is somewhat flawed, and in society in general, really, because when we don't even seem to be able to recognize, or when you don't, and other people on the right don't seem to be able to recognize fascism, how are we going to defend against it? I mean, it's all very well saying, yeah, we're fine of punching fascists, but the core tenets of fascism and the slow growth of fascism is not being recognized by enough people to the point that by the time you actually start attacking fascists, it will be too late, and there's already been casualties and stuff. The whole point of punching Nazis and just Antifa in general, really. Oh gosh, it's just wondering what happened on the screen. Then you obviously just turn your camera on.
So. Oh, I did. Oh, sorry. Did not mean to do that. Apparently, I scared you.
No, you startled me. Just at the moment, I'm just looking at the basic image, and then your screen just pops up and the
thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Anyway, yeah, it's the whole point of defending against fascists, by using counter measurements and stuff, is to ultimately protect people from fascism. So a movement like Antifa, they don't just go around hitting people. It's protecting protesters at marches. It's taking down hateful, horrid propaganda like anti-LGBTQ posters, like anti-immigrant posters and stuff. It's destroying the far right protests that far right groups that try and seek to attack marginalized people. Firebomb, what's it called? Black Lives Matter organizers and stuff. It's not just about punching Nazis for the sake of it because they're bad. It's about more than that. Fundamentally, it's about protecting against fascism. It's literally anti-fascist action. Thus, it's crucial that we recognize that fascism manifests in more than just Nazis waving around flags and going on a march. It's also it's in the rhetoric. It's in the system, which is why I worry when I hear right when people talk about this, because they don't even appear to recognize it, let alone disagree with it. It's not like the fact we go in saying, oh, where's the limit? and not, oh, how are we going to address the things that are causing problems for marginalized people, like trans people, LGBTQ people, minorities, immigrants, all these people that are under threat from the far right. And too many people go in worrying about, what if you don't get a Nazi? What if this happens? It's like the concern is in the wrong place. And it shouldn't be about, what if someone's not that much of a fascist? It should be, how are we going to prevent and stop fascism? Too many people are too focused on the health and well-being of Nazis instead of the health and well-being of the people the Nazis are attacking. That's my real sort of problem with the whole angle of this debate, really.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up. Now, I do whenever I have encountered fascists online, and I have encountered of people who are, I would say, fascistic, or however you want to say it, or who might be fascist. Somehow they might lean towards it. I've encountered people like that, and all I know is I do what I can to show people who might be fascists, because I do see you have a point where some right wingers or people you perceive to be right wingers who do place their concerns in the wrong place, and I will admit maybe I did right there. That is a point I'll concede. However, the reason I mention about, let me go back to the opening statement I wrote for this to get it verbatim. Where do we draw the line where it's appropriate to punch, whether or not to punch someone for backwards beliefs? Now, I know you guys aren't going to punch the fascists just to see how many Nazi scoffs you can collect before Friday. I had to throw a joke in there, just saying. But nonetheless, I'll say, when it comes to the whole idea of punching fascists, and the whole Antifa in a whole, is you see whenever Black Lives Matter and Antifa protest, when Charlottesville happened, when a bunch of man-children fascists were protesting in Charlottesville, they weren't breaking the law by doing so, and that's and as a result of Antifa showing up and the absolute disaster that happened for the whole entirety of August 2017, it led to people making the statement, "Oh, violence on both sides," and and I've seen people argue about this and about free speech and everything, and I will say, I'm not arguing for free speech, Owen, just to be clear. I mean, I support free speech as much as the next guy. However, I don't know if you know this, but I assume you might. The Supreme Court ruled in Chaplinsky versus the state of New Hampshire that fighting words are not protected via the First Amendment, but that could be a snag for groups you support sometimes. But it is a snag for fascists who want to execute minorities and other groups of people. I am all for arming minorities and marginalized people. So, for instance, and I'll just use an extreme example. Let's say a trans woman's walking down the street. Some piece of shit is trying to attack her because he thinks he can tell if she's trans or not, and she just beats the ever-living shit out of him to defend herself. I'm fine with that. So with hang on a second. Fallacy, ad hominem, calling fascists man-children. Well, I hate to bring this up, conundrum. It's not a fallacy because, if I were to say fascists are bad because they're man-children, obviously that would be a fallacy. Me calling fascists man-children just to insult them is not a fallacy. Like, if I know this is a bit of a side tangent, but I don't see whatever. I'm sorry, but yeah, coming back to it, I will say that when it comes to dealing with fascists and dealing with victims of fascism, I think it is probably good. I wouldn't say probably. It should be. Let's focus on the people who are going to be victims of fascism and find ways to and find ways to arm them. Not saying though that it's their responsibility, but saying, hey, if you want to be armed, just in case we can't defend you against all fascists, but in case a few do go after you, you at least have a better chance than someone who has no means to defend themselves. But I will say that for Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and I'm going to try and wrap this up relatively quickly, this point, I'm fine with Antifa and Black Lives Matter on one condition. They don't damage other people's property. So don't go out and destroy someone's business who was the unfortunate bastard who was trapped between fascists and anti-fascists, don't get innocent people involved in your fight. You know, if you want to say, hey, we're protesting fascists, you want to join us? And they say, yeah, sure. If that were to happen, that's fine. But don't get innocent people hurt or killed in this instance. Now, if you do kill a fascist, if it was literally self-defense, then I don't see a problem with it. Didn't mean to go on that long, but you can go ahead.
All right. So earlier on in this little diatribe, you said, I do what I can to call out and stop fascism. And of course, no one's saying you literally have to go and like find the headquarters of like groups and stuff. No one's expecting that.
Why not?
But earlier on in this debate, you said you have no sympathy for illegal immigrants. And yeah, you can say all you like. Oh well, there's justification for deporting illegal immigrants and stuff, and how they're bad and all that. But ultimately, the idea that nationality is a justifiable, way of seeing people as lesser, hence deporting them and removing them from the nation, that is a tenet and a core ideal of fascism. The idea of social order and that only certain people are, worthy of their place in society, or in this case, the nation. And amongst other things, you think about society in relation to people, be it capitalism or just in general. It's not just about saying, "Oh, I disagree with fascism," and I have no doubt that if like you see a Nazi, you're not gonna like just go along with them. You're obviously gonna call them out, but it's not as simple as that. It's not like there's going to be over like just waving around the swastika. They're fascists recognise they have to use tactics to not even win people over, but just do enough to let them coexist. Because that ultimately, fascists in this stage, they don't need everyone to agree with them. They they have to. They need the sort of apathy and tolerance from people, be it liberals or conservatives or quote unquote centrists. They need apathy from all of them. Coming on to Charlottesville, and we talk about how Nazis marching and saying all their stuff isn't it wasn't against the law. That's the whole point. The law isn't a good arbiter of justice. It's not just. The idea that we can just have all these people marching around in saying all these awful things and then see the injustice as people counter protesting that and saying no, it's not, it's this hateful awful stuff, and then the police actually working with Nazis to identify Antifa and BLM protesters and stuff. That's sort of the whole point. The idea of the whole system is deeply corrupt.
Okay. Well, I have...
to sorry to cut you off there.
All right.
You cut me off, but anyway.
Didn't mean to.
No worries. Damaging property. Like, who cares if a window in a Starbucks gets smashed? Why is that more important than the whole point of the protest? This is what I mean by poor opposition to fascism. But the idea that people are sort of like whimpering over the misery of what Starbucks, this multi-billion corporation, has one of its windows smashed, compared to literal fascists are marching and saying they want immigrants kicked out, and obviously eventually a reversion to traditional standards, removal of non-white actors from the state and stuff. Like no sense of priority and of importance. So, who cares if Starbucks have to replace their window if it means we booted some fascists off the street? Ultimately, this whole idea, the state has a monopoly on violence. Therefore they get to decide that people espousing deeply, evil, awful, insipid ideas about people isn't violence because it's just quote unquote speech. But counter protesters trying to defend marginalized and people at large against them is violence. It's deeply flawed, which is sort of why the whole defending against fascism title of the topic is flawed, because defense is not very good in many people's cases, and that sort of includes yourself in some ways because of the the quibbling over property and what's it called, the illegal immigrants and stuff, over the actual opposition to fascism.
Okay, well, I will say that the reason I mentioned the damage to other people's property, like I said, don't get innocent people involved with your protests. Like when you're, because if you're attacking fascists, you don't need to attack other people who have nothing to do with your protest. You don't need to flip over cars and start fires and attack people who didn't do anything to you. That's what I'm saying. Now, I'm not saying that if you dare break a Starbucks window, you're the true fascist. I'm just saying it's you don't need to do that. You can be as much against fascism as you can without having to get innocent people involved with your protest that they might not want to be involved in. Now, coming back to what you said about me calling out fascists or people who might be fascists, how I do it is simple. If I see something, I will say something. So, for instance, my best friend in high school, he's transgender. Some people are cuntish about it. They call him all sorts of things. Same with junior high, and I made sure that if I saw them picking on him, I would deal with it right then and there. That's just what best friends do. And even if he wasn't my best friend, you're a fellow human being. I see someone's attacking you, not on my watch. And I will say that I'm not trying to necessarily prioritize something like a smashed window over the lives of marginalized people. Now, and also coming back to what you said about fascists, like white nationalists, and the police tracking down Antifa members and Black Lives Matter people, who threw the first punch? Who threw the first hit? To me, if you're going to counteract fascists, like if they throw the first punch, I'd say you're totally justified in beating the ever-living shit out of them and making them pay for hitting you. So you'd not only would the law be on your side, there'd be nothing stopping you from literally defending yourself if they throw the first punch. And law enforcement, they have to enforce the law equally. They can't just say, well, you may have thrown the first punch, but because that guy is a Nazi, we're just going to ignore it in this instance. They have to enforce it equally. Like, let's say you and I got in a fight, right? And let's say you were like, oh, S-Man's well, if you knew my actual name, but, if you said, oh, Skylar's a fascist, therefore I punched him, they're going to say, you know what, he's a moron for being a fascist, but that doesn't matter. You punch somebody. We have to arrest you because we have to equally enforce the law. That is what they have to do. And I'm just saying that, and a very dead horse rightly points out, you're not a fascist if you break a Starbucks window. You're just an asshole. The owner of that particular Starbucks is most likely not a rich person. And then he says, you don't seem to understand how franchises work. That's his words, not mine. That's pretty much what I have to say in response to your statement. I do think it's rather silly for the police to be teaming up with white nationalists to find out where the Antifa people are at, but that is in the past, and I can't make the police right that wrong.
Okay, so to try and skim through all of that, firstly, it's it's great that you defend your trans friend from people who are being transphobic to them. Yet at the same time, I keep coming back to the illegal immigrant situation. Let's do a mini thought experiment. Imagine you had a friend at school, and maybe they are of Mexican heritage, and then one day they trust you enough and they say, "Oh, S-Man, my family aren't here legally. We're undocumented. We're worried that with ICE around, we might be deported." Are you going to say, "Oh, well, you should have known the risks"? Like, are you going to say that to them? And then imagine one day at school you see your friend speaking to one of the ICE officers, and are you going to not say something, or are you going to be like, "Oh, well, I support this deportation because I have no sympathy for you"? Like,
okay,
experiment.
Okay, well, actually, I did know somebody who that I think was something with DACA, but that was over a year ago. But, I literally had this very conversation with him. So, to answer your question, I would say to him, yeah, there's the risk. You do know the risk. I wouldn't necessarily go out and rat on him, but um, I'd pretend as if I didn't know he was illegal. I wouldn't say anything about it, but I will say that, yeah, I'd say to him, you do know the risks. God help you, you know, and here's the thing, right? In that instance with that friend, he is attempting to do so. I think he is at this point, but but let's say the scenario described. If the person said to me, "Oh yeah, I have to worry about ICE," I would say, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but you should have come here. Then you wouldn't have to worry about the stress." And I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd be able to handle that type of pressure of, oh, if I sign my name to a bill, or if I go to the hospital, or if I'm the victim of a crime and I need law enforcement to help me, then I'm going to be deported. I don't want that type of stress on my plate. So I would say, um, it wouldn't be worth it. Now I will say that you can keep coming back to the immigration thing, which we've already hashed out, and I don't think there's much more you can even say on immigration. And by the way, I will have to go in about 20 or so minutes, so I will. Yeah. So if you want to talk about BLM in more detail.
Well, I had a few more points I wanted to say about your.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Just that was only like a little segue.
Okay.
Okay. So you talk about the first punch. It doesn't matter who throws the first punch. Fascism in itself is the inherently violent thing. It's it's always in the first punch because it's about curtailing the rights and humanization of people. It's about removing rights of workers or marginalized people to exist. Nazism has no intention of recognizing the humanity and existence of other people. Thus, defending against that, by attacking fascists is justified in that sense. I don't care if it's some fascist leader talking about their stuff and then someone comes and punches them. I don't care if that person didn't throw a punch. They are a fascist and they open themselves up to that attack by espousing their hateful, harmful rhetoric. It's inherently violent. We go looking back at what happened in Nazi Germany. Hitler said if there was more opposition to the SA and then later the SS on the streets, they might not have been able to, climb to power. Which is why Hitler made a massive goal of disenfranchising and then ultimately, illegalizing the far left, the communists and Antifa and socialist groups and stuff. He wanted them gone because he knew what a threat they were to the Nazis gaining social and political control. And you say, oh, it's silly that the police worked with nationalists or white nationalists even and stuff. It's not, well, yeah, it's maybe you can say it's silly from your perspective, but you got to ask why the police did that. It's not like it just did it out of whim, because ultimately the police exist to protect the private property of the state, capital, and the police are infested with people on the far right themselves. The police exist as a role in a very similar sense to that of fascists, in that they both protect the wealthy. They both protect the laws of the state and thus the capitalist system. And the fact they work together isn't a shock because they do it all the time. Why do you think the police are so eager to crack down on counter protesters instead of the Nazis saying hideous, awful things?
Okay. Well, okay. I have a lot to address there. Well, I will say that but if someone just says they're a fascist, well, if they say things that fascists say, like a white ethno state, because you did say a lot there, if you just run up to them and punch them, like that's not going to do anything to them. They're not going to be like, wow, you just knocked the stupid out of me. Thank you so much. Now, I have a question for you, which when I would ask you the question, you would deflect. Let's say, for instance, I was dumb enough to be a white nationalist and I wanted a white ethno state, and you saw me in public, and whether or not you knew me, like how we know one another via Twitter, would you punch me if I was to say, oh yeah, I want non-whites to be removed from our little ethno state?
What, me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
Well, only if I had the appropriate way to cover my face, because the police, they tend to be somewhat, like I said a second ago, they target the counter fascists over them. But the whole point of Antifa is to organize as a group and stuff. I mean, they're not. It's not like an organization. There's no central body of Antifa. It's just
Yeah,
a
I know.
movement.
I can.
But there are factions which do organize together. But anyhow, what was I going to say? Yeah, you said that fascists aren't going to change their opinions by being clocked in the face. Like, no one's expecting them to just suddenly come up, regain consciousness and be like, oh yeah, I'm not a fascist anymore. The whole point isn't directly from that. It's about protecting the targets of fascism. So if fascists are more afraid to go out on the streets, if they're more in fear of being more actively opposed, if they're unable to march in their hundreds of thousands because of the massive organization against them, that's a victory. That's not necessarily converting them from fascism, but it's it's a black person not being attacked, it's a trans person not being violently assaulted or something. It's something it's someone being protected from the fascists. The dialogue of the conversation has to be focused on the protection of people from fascism, not on, oh, was that person really that big a fascist, or is it right to punch someone? It's about protecting people from fascism. Ultimately, the ultimate protection has to come through the systemic deconstruction of capitalism, obviously, but ultimately, or not ultimately, sorry, directly, it's just about protecting people, really.
All right. So, like I mentioned earlier, the police have to enforce the law equally. So, so if you have to cover your face when you're punching somebody, just saying, the police, like when I said it was silly, I said it was rather stupid. But at the same time, when they were teaming up with white nationalists to find Antifa people, they have to enforce the law equally. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to emphasize this. They have to enforce the law equally, protect and serve. I don't really like the police sometimes, but that's some police officers. Some of them are so weak and so trigger happy. You can have a cell phone in your hand and they'll blast you away. Some cops are absolute cowards and some actually have a spine. But I digress. That will be a tangent for another day. I will. What the hell are you typing in the chat? Oh, I see. Anyway, yeah, the reason they have to do so is they swore to uphold the law equally. They can't just side with you guys and say, yeah, you punched that fascist in the face and he hit his head on the curb. He might have brain damage, he might die, but you guys were doing the right thing, therefore we're gonna let you go. Now they might agree with you. Maybe some cops deep down are thinking, I wish I could let this guy go, but I swore to uphold the law and enforce it equally. So they might arrest you, and they might deep down think, I wish I didn't have to. Same thing can apply with cops who have to arrest people for carrying an ounce of marijuana. They personally wish they didn't have to, but they have to enforce. They can't pick and choose what laws to enforce. And you know what? Like I said, I don't feel bad for a fascist if that fascist gets punched in the face while the person who punched him has brass knuckles. I'm just saying, I'd have to ask where it would be a limit. Like if someone, if they're saying, chug communists out of helicopters, because some people who are considered fascists are total pose. Like you called Frederick Voltaire Bastiat, who sounded like he was defending Pinochet. You asked him if he was a fascist. I don't know if he was trolling or not, but some people are just total pose and shouldn't be taken seriously. And there are some people where it's like, thank God we found you so we can keep an eye on you.
Okay.
I should have said when I finished. I should have said where.
It's no worry. Okay, so the police. The whole point of what I'm trying to say really is that, and what I have said a few times actually is that the law is not the same as justice, and justice is not necessarily conveyed by the law. Just because some things are law doesn't mean it's justified. And the fact that police are, overly focusing on counter protesters instead of the people who are, literally espousing white nationalist rhetoric, be it anti-LGBTQ, be it anti-immigrant, anti-people of color, all that stuff. The fact that as a society we focus on that, or the police focus on that, should say something about the nature of the police. Why do they focus on people trying to make the world a better place and protect people over, the fascists trying to curtail it to their views? And ultimately, it stems from that the police, as an institution, exist to protect the capital of the wealthy, to protect capitalism, essentially, to stop what happened in other countries where the workers overthrew capitalism. And yeah, fine, like, it's not like every single police officer is going to be of the mindset of we need to overthrow sorry, not every police officer literally is a fascist. Like, of course not. But ultimately, the institution they represent and the basis of that institution is one that aligns itself with fascists over anti-fascists. I mean, only got to look at the role of, like you said, trigger-happy police officers. Why do you think they consistently get away with their crimes, or murdering someone or brutalizing someone? Why do you think people are treated so poorly in police custody? Why do you think the police were happy to work with Nazis? Literal people waving around swastikas and waving, like, firebombing black churches and stuff. Why are they happy to work with them to identify counter protesters? It all comes back to the same themes, and I feel like if you take away nothing from what I've been saying tonight, just think that perhaps the law is not as just and secure and a conveyor of justice and fairness as it likes to portray itself as.
Okay, well, I will say that, I have taken things away from what you've said. And if you've seen my Twitter bio, it should say enough that I don't agree with everything the law says. But like I said, they can't pick and choose what laws to enforce. Like I said, I do have concerns about the cops, about, like, when can cops be wrong. I've said that, and to be fair, you might not have heard it, so I'll just say it right here for everybody. I have concerns about when cops are, like, when are they in the wrong? And the reason that they get away with such shit is, one, I think a lack of transparency. Two, I think the qualifications, the bar needs to be raised. So if you're some guy who is such a coward, who, if someone has a cell phone in their hand, you're going to shoot them, if you're that nervous, you shouldn't, first of all, you shouldn't own a gun, period. And you shouldn't be a cop. Well, maybe not, you can't own a gun. You got to learn to grow a pair before you own the gun. Now, coming back to what you said about why are the cops not focusing on the fascists and the Nazis, what do you expect them to do? They can't arrest somebody for holding an anti-fascist, not anti-fascist. They can't arrest them for thinking, oh yeah, people of color should be put in an ethno-state or holding bigoted views. They can't do that. That's unconstitutional under the First Amendment. So while I'm pretty sure some cops would think, if the First Amendment wasn't a thing, I'd arrest that fucker for holding some anti-gay view, but they can't do that. You can say, oh yeah, I want to punch fascists. I use the scalp of a fascist as I don't know what you use it as, but whatever. You can say that all you want, but until it turns to violence, the police can't do anything. Just like how if I were to say, oh yeah, I chuck communists out of helicopters, people will think that's stupid. And they'll think I'm an idiot for believing in some dictator in Chile. But unless I was to actually find communists and try and kidnap them and throw them out of helicopters, nobody can do shit. You yourself as a person, you can, because you're not a law enforcement official. You can say to this person, you can try all you want to throw that person out of a helicopter over my dead body. Okay? We probably should head to closing because I have to go in 8 minutes to a party I agreed to go to, so I probably should have.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But at the very least, I'm not going to abandon you early before we close. But
yeah, I'll just wrap up what I have to say in response to that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like you said, what are police supposed to do? Exactly. That's the whole point of what a major point of what I'm trying to say. The idea of the police is a deeply flawed institution, and the idea of it is to protect capital and the wealthy, and thus they align all the time with the far right, a lot of the time even with the far right, which is why, for instance, people, the FBI and stuff, have troubles tracking white supremacists, but will crack down on any Antifa or Black Lives Matter activist who's daring to show their face in public and stuff. um the role is deeply flawed. It's focusing on people who are trying to counter protest. Maybe they're using violence, but so what? They're focusing on that over the actual fascists. And ultimately it comes down to the fact that ideologically the role of the police is not to uphold justice, but to uphold the law, which is designed. The law is made by the wealthy, by by the government, which is run essentially by the wealthy, as we well know. But to conclude, in the sake of you trying to save time, just ultimately, we need to, if we want to oppose fascism, we need to recognise that it shares many traits and is growing through capitalism. It's not something we can separate from that. It's inherently related to it. It's stemmed in our society, and we have to realize that many tenets of society that is told to us through the law to be supposedly the way things are need to be changed.
Is that the end of your statement?
Yeah, I'm trying to be conclusive.
I'll try to do the same. All right. So throughout the course of this this interesting debate, minus the technical issues, I will say that I would say that I know that America is a deeply flawed country. Well, the government, not the country. The government is the real flawed thing. The police are, of course, flawed. Our government with its people are flawed. I will say that, let's say our government isn't doing enough in your eyes to combat fascists. I'm totally fine with you combating fascism. All the power to you, man. But like I said, I don't want innocent people who have nothing to do with this whole drama to be forced to be involved. So if you're going to combat fascism, I say it like this: don't start the fight, but sure as hell finish it if they start it first. Because not only will you be backed by the law at that point, because you didn't throw the first punch, the person who did it is now the one in the real trouble. I've already stated my issue with calling with the whole fascism being exclusively right wing, but I think people can already guess as to why. But anyway, I think I'll just wrap up my statement like this: the police are an issue. However, the method of protesting is flawed. If you only attack fascists when they attack you first, or hell, if they go to attack you and you beat the shit out of them and you stop them, all the power to you. Anyway, that will be the end of this stream, everybody. Thank you to joining me, Fro, and I hope you have a good night, and I hope the next parts of everyone's lives will be fruitful for years to come. Thank you to everyone who listened, and I hope you all have a good night, and till next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this, man.
As always.